tonight. He has 3 books published, and all of them are in the poetry room, by the way, so do make a point to come and check them out, those of you who have library privileges. He is an extremely interesting, imaginative, and witty poet. His books have been published by Faber. The titles of them are New Weather, Mules, and Why Brownlee Left. Now, because some of his friends and admirers and fans are going to be late, we decided that Seamus should read first. After, we're still getting settled. Come in, Michael. Seamus Heaney, as you know, is our great poet, friend, and teacher at Harvard. Every spring semester for the next several years, and for the rest of time, I would like to take this opportunity to ask Seamus to please come and read every spring for the poetry room. But so that before Paul Muldoon, Seamus will come and read some of his poems, and then we'll make a more succinct or acute or in-depth introduction of a younger Irish poet who will read after him. Thank you. So, Seamus Heaney first.
Well, I just read from 3, I was going to say 3 fronts, but that makes it an unnecessarily military enterprise. There are 3 kinds of work that I've been doing recently, and I just do little samples out of each, and then give the floor to Paul here. A friend of mine said that I should fall in love with my own emptiness instead of trying to fill it with translations. I think people advancing towards early middle age who are writing poems always fall in love with the fullness of others' work at that particular point. So I'll read a couple of corks from my own emptiness. They come from a Middle Irish poem called Bullahivna. It's in prose and verse. It translates variously as the frenzy of Sweeney or the madness of Sweeney or whatever. And Sweeney is a king who is cursed by a saint and turned into a bird and lives in the trees. One piece of this I have had in shape for about 10 years. And I repeat it like a nursery rhyme just for consolation and confidence at times, and that is why I'm now beginning with it. Sweeney, since he has turned into a bird, gets to know the trees intimately. And he speaks of them in Irish, of course, but this is a rendering of the Irish as he perches paranoid in the trees. The bushy, leafy oak tree is highest in the wood. The forking shoots of hazel hide sweet hazelnuts. The alder is my darling, all thornless in the gap, some milk of human kindness coursing in its sap. The blackthorn is a jaggy creel stippled with dark sloes. Green watercress is thatch on wells where the drinking blackbird goes. Sweetest of the leafy stalks, the vetches strew the pathway. The oyster grass is my delight, and the wild strawberry. Low-set clumps of apple trees drum down fruit when shaken. Scarlet berries clot like blood on mountain rowan. Briars curl in sideways, arch a stickle back, draw blood and curl up innocent to sneak the next attack. The yew tree in each churchyard wraps night in its dark hood. Ivy is a shadowy genius of the wood. Holly rears its windbreak, a door in winter's face. Lifeblood on a spear shaft darkens the grain of ash. Birch tree, smooth and lovely, delicious to the breeze. High twigs plait and crown it the queen of trees. The aspen pales and whispers, hesitates. 1,000 frightened scuts race in its leaves. But thank you. Rather too flashy, that, I think. But what disturbs me more than anything is an oak rod always swinging and swinging. says Sweeney. Sweeney is the most resourceful complainer in Irish literature until the heroes of Beckett make their appearance. And it gives me some pleasure to have translated all the quatrains in which he speaks, because I know I'm the only one who will read them all when it's eventually published. I mean, people will skip them. But I hope they will read his last set of quatrains where he is lying pierced by a spear. It is too much bother to go into the reasons why he gets pierced by a spear. Interesting, though. But as he lies, thinking he is uttering a personal distress, he is, of course, representing a great archetype. And he is... he utters in terms which are familiar to anybody who has read, say, The Wanderings of Oisin, not to speak of the Ossianic literature or the Fenian literature in Irish. That is where the new monastic, Christian, self-wounding, leg-crossed culture, bell-ringing too, versus the old birdsong, woodland, heroic spear shaft type culture. Sweeney, as he dies, speaks long-windedly in terms of these oppositions. There was a time when I preferred the turtle dove's soft jubilation as it hunted round a pool to the murmur of conversation. There was a time when I preferred the blackbird singing on the hill and the stag loud against the storm to the clinking tongue of this bell. There was a time when I preferred the mountain grouse crying at dawn to the voice and closeness of a beautiful woman. There was a time when I preferred wolf packs yelping and howling to the sheepish voice of a cleric bleating plain song. You are welcome to pledge health and carouse in your drinking dens. I will dip and steal water from a well with my open palm. You are welcome to the cloistered hush of your students' conversation. I will study the pure chant of hounds in Glen Balkane. You are welcome to your salt meat and fresh meat in feasting houses. I will live content elsewhere on tufts of green watercress. The herd's sharp spear wounded me and passed clean through my body. Ah, Christ, who disposed all things, why was I not killed at Moira? Of all the innocent lairs I made the length and breadth of Ireland, I remember an open bed above the loch in Mourne. Of all the innocent lairs I made the length and breadth of Ireland, I remember bedding down above the wood in Glen Balkane. To you, Christ, I give thanks for your body in communion. Whatever evil I have done in the world, I repent. There are those, of course, who see this moment of a moment of caving in of the old culture. This I began to work on these things 10 years ago when I made a move. I was teaching in Queen's University in Belfast, and I moved from Belfast to Wicklow, and I was trying to find out what it meant to be a poet. I wanted to work full-time as a writer. That was a phrase to me, and I wanted to try to live it out. But when I got to be full-time as a writer, I had to get something to do. So Sweeney, as a translation, was something I could work at. Before that, I had written a little poem where I thought he had given a visiting card. One of the sounds that has always entranced me most is the sound of feet through long grass, stealthy and sexual feet. Shh, shh, shh. And I just tried to write a poem about that. Then I realized it was Sweeney giving his visiting card before he had arrived. And then after I had done a version of it, I put him into another bit of another poem, and then I did another bit, and then I put the three together to form a sequence, you see. So this is called Sweeney Astray. It's about, really, I think what I think are the sources of my pleasure, or identification rather, with Sweeney, because there were tinkers. When I was at eye level with the hedges, as Sweeney was when I was very small, there were tinkers called Sweeneys who lived along the road, and that gave me a very primitive delight that there was this medieval king called Sweeney. And I just thought of myself as infested with wood smoke standing in the hedge, watching the tinker slightly scared. Then one day, I was taken to shoot pigeons. A thing I didn't carry a gun, actually. I knew I would have missed, but the two people who had guns with them and intent on shooting pigeons brought me with them and dressed me up, put a fishnet over my head, put kind of camouflage on me with twigs. And there I was walking stealthily along the hedge with all this greenery on me, and I thought, there I am, there he is, that's Sweeney. That is the poem, but it's in different words in the poem. The middle bit is that most affected of tries, a prose poem. Sweeney Astray. As if a trespasser unbolted a forgotten gate and ripped the growth, tangling its lower bars. Just beyond the hedge, he has opened a dark morse along the bank, a crooked wounding of the silent cobwebbed grass. If I stop, he stops, like the moon. He lives in his feet and ears, weather-eyed, all pad and listening, a denless mover. Under the bridge, his reflection shifts sideways to the current, mothy, alluring. I am haunted by his stealthy rustling, the unexpected spoor, the pollen settling. I was sure I knew him. The time I'd spent obsessively in that upstairs room, bringing myself close to him. Each entranced hiatus, as I chain-smoked and stared out the dormer into the hillside, I was laying myself open. He was depending on me as I hung out on the limb of a phrase, like a youngster dared out onto the alder branch over a whirlpool. Small dream self in the branches. Dream fears I inclined towards, interrogating. Are you the one I run upstairs to find drowned under running water in the bath? The one the mowing machine severed like a hair in the stiff freeze of harvest? Whose little bloody clothes we buried in the garden? The one who lay awake in darkness, a wall's breadth from the troubled hoofs? After I had dared these invocations, I went back towards the gate to follow him, and my stealth was second nature to me, as if it were coming into my own. I remembered I had been vested for this calling. When I was taken aside that day, I had the sense of election. They dressed my head in a fishnet and plaited leafy twigs through the meshes, so my vision was a bird's at the heart of a thicket, and I spoke as I moved like a voice from a shaking bush. King of the ditchbacks, I went with them obediently to the edge of a pigeon wood. Deciduous canopy, screened wane of evening, we lay beneath like effigies. No birds came, but I waited silent among briars and stones, or whispered, or broke the watery gossamers if I moved a muscle. Come back to us, they said, in harvest, when we hide in the stooked corn, when the gun dogs can hardly retrieve what's brought down. And I saw myself rising to move in that dissimulation, top-knotted, masked in sheaves, noting the fall of birds. A rich young man, leaving everything he had for a migrant solitude. This is another kind of treey, secrety, stealthy, grassy kind of poem. It comes from front two. These are another a group of poems set on an island in a lake in County Donegal, Loch Derg. This island is a place of pilgrimage where people walk round and round in circles, fasting and in their bare feet. And it's a very social event for the individuals, but it's also a very ritualistic, self-punishing occasion when you get quite hallucinatory. You sit up all night and you're fasted and you're walking around in circles. And you're usually much younger than you are now when you're at it. But it's a good way of encountering, it's a good excuse for encountering parts of yourself. And the idea in the sequence is that you meet people who represent what you came from, and then people who represent something that you might become, or that that might free you. Well, these are 3 short sonnets representing the first possibilities of a freedom for the self, which is infested with sexuality. And as I say, it's a hedgy, treey kind of thing. It begins with memory of playing a game called Secrets, which was played about the age of 3 or 4 and was really an excuse to get into the hedge with little girls and whisper to them. Then the second is an adolescent need, much less close to a little girl, actually, just fantasizing around words. And the third is some kind of fulfillment, and it has a few lines from the poet Dante translated. In the second one, there's also a line from Horace, which you will recognize by the mention of Phoebus. And they're sonnets, but little stage effects come in from the actual pilgrimage, like bells ring and hymns to the Virgin Mary are sung. But that's background music to the thing. Freckle face, fox head, pod of the broom, catkin pixie, little fern swish. Where did she arrive from? Like a wish wished and gone. Her I chose at secrets and whispered to when we were playing houses. I was sunstruck at the basilica door, a stillness far away, a space, a dish, a blackened tin and knocked over stool, like the tramped Neolithic floor uncovered among dunes, where the bent grass whispers on like reeds about Midas's secrets, secrets. I shut my ears to the bell, head hugged, eyes shut, leaf ears. Don't tell, don't tell. A stream of pilgrims answering the bell trailed up the steps as I went down them, towards the bottle green, still shade of an oak tree. Shades of the Sabine farm on the beds of St. Patrick's Purgatory. Late summer, country distance, not an air. Loosen the toga for wine and poetry, till Phoebus returning rout the morning star. As a somnolent hymn to Mary rose, I felt an old pang that bags of grain and the sloped shafts of forks and hoes once mocked me with, at my own long virgin fasts and thirsts, my nightly shadow feasts, haunting the granaries of words like breasts. As if I knelt for years at a keyhole, mad for it, and all that ever opened was the breathed-on grill of a confessional, until that night I saw her honey-skinned shoulder blades and the wheatlands of her back through the wide keyhole of her keyhole dress, and a window facing the deep south of luck opened, and I inhaled the land of kindness. As little flowers that were all bowed and shut by the night chills rise on their stems and open as soon as they have felt the touch of sunlight, so I revived in my own wilting powers, and my heart flushed like somebody set free. Translated, given, under the oak tree. I just do one more of those and a couple little shorties. If the secret engagement with the other feminine sexual energy represents some kind of way of getting away, the political demand, the mess of the pious pulls you in, and one of the things that keeps pulling you back in is some claim, true or false, to solidarity with people less fortunate than yourself, shall we say. And this is this is a kind of another Sweeney's, another kind of double, a different kind of double. Somebody I was on a football team with in the late 50s and early 60s, and who owned a grocery store eventually, and then whatever else happened to him, he tells his story here. He lived in a place called the Hochel in County Antrim. The world is divided into those who can pronounce a Hochel on sight and those who cannot. It is spelled A-H-O-G-H-I-L-L. That's a hog hill. Anyway, this is another point in the pilgrimage, or the feigned pilgrimage. I had come to the edge of the water, soothed by just looking, idling over it as if it were a clear barometer or a mirror, when his reflection did not appear, but I sensed a presence entering into my concentration on not being concentrated as he spoke my name. And though I was reluctant, I turned to meet his face, and the shock is still in me at what I saw. His brow was blown open above the eye, and blood had dried on his neck and cheek. "Easy now," he said. "It's only me. You've seen men as raw after a football match." What time it was when I was wakened up, I still don't know, but I heard this knocking, and it scared me, like the phone in the small hours, so I had the sense not to put on the light, but looked out from behind the curtain. I saw two customers on the doorstep, and an old Land Rover with the doors open, parked on the street. But they must have been waiting for it to move, for they shouted to come down into the shop. She started to cry then, and roll round the bed, lamenting and lamenting to herself, not even asking who it was. "Is your head astray, or what's come over you?" I said, more to bring myself to my senses than out of any real anger at her, for the knocking shook me, the way they kept it up, and her whinging and half-screeching made it worse. All the time they were shouting, "Shop, shop." So I pulled on my shoes and a sports coat and went back to the window and called out, "What do you want? Could you quieten the racket, or I'll not come down at all? There's a child not well. Open up and see what you have got," one of them said. He stepped back off the footpath so I could see his face in the street lamp, and when the other moved, I knew them both. But bad and all as the knocking was, the quiet hit me worse. She was quiet herself now, lying dead still, whispering to watch out. At the bedroom door, I switched on the light. "It's odd they didn't look for a chemist. Who are they anyway at this time of the night?" she asked, with the eyes standing in her head. "I know them to see," I said, but something made me reach and squeeze her hand across the bed before I went downstairs into the aisle of the shop. I stood there going weak in the legs. I remember the stale smell of cooked meat or something coming through as I went to open up. From then on, you know as much about it as I do. Did they say nothing? Nothing. What would they say? Were they in uniform? Not masked in any way? They were barefaced as they would be in the day, shites thinking they were the be-all and the end-all. Not that it's any consolation, but they were caught, I told him, and got jail. Big-limbed, decent, open-faced, he stood forgetful of everything now, except whatever was welling up in his spoiled head, beginning to smile. "You've put on weight." Through life and death, he had hardly aged. There always was an athlete's cleanliness shining off him, and except for the ravaged forehead and the blood, he was still that same rangy midfielder in a blue jersey and pants, the one stylist on the team, the perfect, clean, unthinkable victim. Forgive the way I have lived indifferent. Forgive my timid, circumspect involvement, I surprised myself by saying. "Forgive my eye," he said. "Oh, that's above my head." And then a stun of pain seemed to go through him, and he trembled like a heat wave and faded. I just do these 3 wee short ones. This is called the Railway Children. There was a railway ran through the farm where I grew up, and along the railway there ran telegraph wires, and along the telegraph wires, when it rained, there ran raindrops, and we thought that that was the way the telegrams were sent on the raindrops. When we climbed the slopes of the cutting, we were eye level with the white cups of the telegraph poles and the sizzling wires. Like lovely freehand, they curved for miles east and miles west beyond us, sagging under their burden of swallows. We were small and thought we knew nothing worth knowing. We thought words traveled the wires in the shiny pouches of raindrops, each one seeded full with the light of the sky, the gleam of the lines, and ourselves so infinitesimally scaled we could stream through the eye of a needle. This other poem is also, to some extent, child's eye view. Somebody last night came to visit us in Adam's house, and he said that in order to return by the corridors by which he had come, he had dropped crumbs in the corridors, recalling the story, of course, of Hansel and Gretel. But Hansel, the second time around, when the crumbs had been eaten, dropped pebbles. This poem is full of little references to big mythologies and small fairy stories. It's called The Underground, Orpheus and all that, but in particular the underground station at South Kensington, close to the Albert Hall. There's also a word which is used here. I'm not quite sure whether it's a standard English word or not. It's, I know it's not used in standard English, but it could be argued for in standard English. The word is japped. A jap in the first language I spoke was a little spatter of dirt, a kind of freckle of muck shot up by a wheel or something like that. As in Japan, I think. Well, I'm not sure. Anyway. There we were in the vaulted tunnel running. You and your going away coat speeding ahead. And me then, like a fleet god gaining upon you before you turned to a reed or some new white flower japped with crimson, as the coat flapped wild and button after button sprang off and fell in a trail between the underground and the Albert Hall. Honeymooning, moonlighting, late for the proms, our echoes die in that corridor. And now I come as Hansel came on the moonlit stones, retracing the path back, lifting the buttons, to end up in a drafty, lamplit station after the trains have gone. The wet track, bared and tensed as I am, all attention for your step following, and damned if I look back. Just before Paul comes on, I'd like to read this poem, which I know he likes. If I can find it. This is the kind of thing really angers me with other poets. Pretending they've lost a page, you know. I think I know it anyway. It's very short. A little poem called Widgeon. Widgeon. It had been badly shot. While he was plucking it, he found, he said, the windpipe. Oh, sorry, no, I can't find. Oh, no, I got it now. It had been badly shot. When he was plucking it, he found, he said, the voice box, like a flute stop in the broken windpipe, and blew upon it, unexpectedly, his own small widgeon cries. Thank you very much. Yeah. It's my pleasure, however, to be the precursor, as it were, here for Paul Muldoon, who, as Stratis says, has published 3 books of poems and has a new book coming with the name. The name of the new book is Quoof. He may tell you something about that later himself. His first 3 books, New Weather, Mules, and Why Brownlee Left, were published by Faber in England and are published here by Wake Forest University Press. I like to think that New Weather, the title of the first book, was indeed not only an exact title of the book, but an intimation of what happened when the book published, because Paul Muldoon, though is a young poet, still has established a new way and a new weather in poetry in Ireland and elsewhere. He already has a school of imitators, I can tell you. So that is, to begin with, an indication of the newness and the excitement, the current that was generated when he published. I don't want to speak too long or too long-windedly, but he has, I think, the first essential of any lyric poet, a wonderful inner sense of linguistic freedom and supply, that he can swim in the words with great ease, and that the words seem to buoy him up, and he keeps them buoyant. A sense of supply and a sense of play, wonderfully present. The elements of his work are, in one way, traditional and pastoral and not unexpected, the elements themselves, the landscapes, the language, the outback of Ireland is the imagery of his poetry. And yet, what is unexpected and what is new is the relationship with those elements, which is a playful one, an ironical one. He doesn't look to his landscape or his countryside for corroboration of himself. It is, as it were, au contraire. I think Muldoon's poetry is domestic, but it's also intransigent. It is insisting upon the validity of play and refusal, even while it courts a kind of lyric swoon. It refuses you the right to swoon and pulls the safety net or the safety sheet from under you. It insists, as I say, on poetry as play, as game, as music. It also insists that the lyric poem is a guarantee of some kind of intelligence, some kind of selfhood, and it refuses the lyric poem to be some kind of self-indulgence. It's my great pleasure to introduce Paul Muldoon. Great to you.
Thank you very much, Seamus, for that introduction, and thank you for coming along. I'll begin, if I may, with a poem about my father, who sometime during the 1930s decided that he had had enough of Ireland and that particular part of Ireland, County Tyrone, which is about halfway across the north. He decided that he would leave there and emigrate to Australia. He went about it in what seems to me a rather odd way, because he arranged with a friend of his that they would meet at a crossroads somewhere in the middle of County Tyrone, and that they would set off from there with their bags in their hot little hands for Belfast and the boat, and presumably from there to Brisbane or wherever. So my father arrived along at whatever it was, 12 o'clock on Tuesday, and his friend wasn't there, so he waited for an hour. His friend still didn't turn up. He waited for another hour, still no sign of him. So he turned round and went home again, and stayed there more or less for the rest of his life. Apart from one or two trips to England, where he worked as a navvy and a labourer. In this poem, I've tried to describe, on one hand, the facts of his life. On the other, I imagine him setting off, not as it happens for Australia, because at the risk of there being some Australians present, I can't for the life of me imagine why Australia was where he picked. But for Argentina, this was the Argentina of the World Cup year rather than of more recent memory. And imagine him living a life, I suppose, in which he wouldn't have met that particular woman and had that particular set of children. I too have trailed my father's spirit from the mud-walled cabin behind the mountain where he was born and bred, TB and Scarlatina, the farm where he was first hired out, to Wigan, to Crewe Junction, a building site from which he disappeared and took passage almost for Argentina. The mountain is coming down with Hazel, the building site a slum, while he has gone no further than Brazil. That's him on the veranda drinking rum with a man who might be a Nazi, his children asleep under their mosquito nets. I'll read the last poem I wrote, I suppose partly because it has some excitement for me. It's a poem set in Eglish in County Tyrone, where, as I say, we were forced to be born. And that place name, Eglish, is the Irish word for a church. There's a reference in the poem to a confection called Clove Rock, which we were very fond of. I don't know if you get it on this side of the Atlantic, a kind of sticky thing. The poem is called The Right Arm. I was 3-ish when I plunged my arm into a sweet jar for the last bit of Clove Rock. We kept a shop in Eglish that sold bread, milk, butter, cheese, bacon and eggs, Andrew's liver salts, and until now, Clove Rock. I would give my right arm to have known then how Eglish was itself wedged between Ecclesia and Église. The Eglish sky was its own stained glass vault, and my right arm was sleeved in glass that is yet to shatter. A couple of years after that, we made this momentous move from County Tyrone into County Armagh, about 10 miles away, and we were brought up just outside a little village called the Moy, where, to be perfectly honest, there wasn't a great deal going on. But one of the things that was going on, I suppose in common with villages right the way around the world, was that on Saturday afternoon we trooped out religiously to the cinema, where at that stage, late 50s, early 60s, we were fairly confident of seeing Gene Autry or Audie Murphy, or presumably Ronald Reagan, though I don't remember him, riding in or out of the sunset. And this is a poem about going along there, expecting all that, and having a bit of a shock. The Weepies. Most Saturday afternoons at the local hippodrome saw the Pathy News rooster, then the recurring dream of a lonesome drifter through uninterrupted range. Will Hunter, so gifted he could peel an orange in a single fluent gesture, was the leader of our gang. The curtain rose this afternoon on a lion, not a gong. When the crippled girl who wanted to be a dancer met the married man who was dying of cancer, our hankies unfurled like flags of surrender. I believe something fell asunder in even Will Hunter's hands. That was Saturday. On Sunday, there was this peculiar family tradition. I think it extended beyond our own family, so it wasn't so bad, but pretty bad, because what happened was that we would troop out on Sunday afternoons, not every Sunday afternoon, but it seemed kind of monotonously, regularly, to visit a graveyard. Someone would hear tell of a marvellous cemetery up the country where you could go and look at the tombstones. What the attraction was, I really don't know, because there weren't, so far as I remember, any marvellously witty epitaphs. It would have been nothing like the Quaker graveyard in Nantucket or anything like that. But anyway, for a long time we were dependent on our neighbours and relatives for a trip to the graveyard. Then the world opened up in a marvellous way because we got a car of our own. And I remember the very first trip we took in that was to see the new roundabout at Ballygawley. This was the first roundabout, not roundabout, in the vicinity. And I remember very vividly, we drove along there and we drove round it. And now that we'd got the measure of it, we drove round it again. There's a reference in the poem to a kind of backup, secondary wing, I suppose you might call them, of the Royal Ulster Constabulary, the B Specials, who are now defunct. The Sightseers. My father and mother, my brother and sister and I, with Uncle Pat, our dour, best-loved uncle, had set out that Sunday afternoon in July in his broken-down Ford, not to visit some graveyard. One died of shingles, one of fever, another's knees turned to jelly, but the brand new roundabout at Ballygawley, the first in mid-Ulster. Uncle Pat was telling us how the B Specials had stopped him one night somewhere near Ballygawley and smashed his bicycle and made him sing the sash and curse the Pope of Rome. They held a pistol so hard against his forehead, there was still the mark of an O when he got home. It's a poem about a fella I went to school with. My watch has stopped. At least I, by and large, went to school. He made the occasional guest appearance. He was kind of famous truant, or mitcher, as we would have called him. And this is a poem about his life. It's called Anseo, which is A-N-S-E-O. When the master was calling the roll at the primary school in College Lands, you were meant to call back Anseo and raise your hand as your name occurred. Anseo meaning here and now, all present and correct, was the first word of Irish I spoke. The last name on the ledger belonged to Joseph Mary Plunkett Ward, and was followed as often as not by silence, knowing looks, a nod and a wink, the master's droll, and where's our little ward of court. I remember the first time he came back, the master had sent him out along the hedges to weigh up for himself and cut a stick with which he would be beaten. After a while, nothing was spoken. He would arrive as a matter of course with an ash plant, a sally rod, or finally the hazel wand he had whittled down to a whiplash, its twist of red and yellow lacquers, sanded and polished, and altogether so delicately wrought that he'd engraved his initials on it. I last met Joseph Mary Plunkett Ward in a pub just over the Irish border, He was living in the open, in a secret camp on the other side of the mountain. He was fighting for Ireland, making things happen. And he told me, Joe Ward, of how he had risen through the ranks to quartermaster, commandant, how every morning at parade his volunteers would call back Anseo and raise their hands as their names occurred. I discovered recently, to my surprise and shock, that despite the fact that Ireland is a fairly damp spot, the frog, the common frog, I suppose that is, the Irish frog, is really a very recent invader. Sometime, apparently, in the mid-17th century, an English naturalist at Trinity College, Dublin, discovered that there was a lack of frog in the country, and the next time he was back home, he brought with him some frog spawn, and the whole thing started from there, and the frog went from strength to strength. I've kind of fiddled about with the historical facts of that, because in a way what the poem is about is our misreadings or various readings of history. I have the frog come just after the beginning of the 19th century. It's a poem about getting to the truth of the matter. The frog comes to mind as another small upheaval amongst the rubble. His eye matches exactly the bubble in my spirit level. I set aside hammer and chisel and take him on the trowel. The entire population of Ireland springs from a pair left to stand overnight in a pond in the gardens of Trinity College. 2 bottles of wine left there to chill after the act of union. There is surely in this story a moral for our times. What if I put him to my head and squeezed it out of him, like the juice of freshly squeezed limes or a lemon sorbet? I read a poem about the impact of the Cuban Missile Crisis on the parish of College Lands, a little Catholic parish. The impact, I may tell you, was considerable. At least it was very noticeable, because everyone round about trooped out and joined the already fairly lengthy queue for the confessional. This was it coming up. And there's a poem about about a very close thing. Cuba. There's a reference in it, by the way, to General George, I think it was, Patton, who paid a kind of flying visit to the north of Ireland after the war to thank us for our contribution. Cuba. My eldest sister arrived home that morning in her white muslin evening dress. Who the hell do you think you are, running out to dances in next to nothing? As though we hadn't enough bother with the world at war, if not at an end. My father was pounding the breakfast table. Those Yankees were touch and go as it was. If you'd heard Patton in Armagh. But this Kennedy's nearly an Irishman, so he's not much better than ourselves. And him with only to say the word. If you've got anything on your mind, maybe you should make your peace with God. I could hear May from beyond the curtain. Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. I told a lie once. I was disobedient once. And Father, a boy touched me once. Tell me, child, was this touch immodest? Did he touch your breast, for example? He brushed against me, father, very gently. In some country areas of Ireland, still, you'll find men who are proclaimed, at least self-proclaimed, and indeed generally proclaimed, to have particular powers and cures for various disabilities, like ringworm and diseases in cattle and various maladies. And this is a poem about a visit to one of these, not exactly witch doctors, but men with a cure who, as I say, still exist. The poem is called Glanders. If Glanders is anything as bad as it sounds, it must be pretty terrible. It's it's a disease of, I think, the respiratory system of horses, though I'm told that that humans can pick it up. Glanders. When you happened to sprain your wrist or ankle, you made your way to the local shaman, if shaman is the word for Larry Toll, who was so at ease with himself, so tranquil, a cloud of smoke would graze on his thatch like the cow in the cautionary tale, while a tether of smoke curled down his chimney, and the end of the tether was attached to Larry's ankle or to Larry's wrist. He would conjure up a poultice of soot and spit and flannel talk, how he had a soft spot for the mud of Flanders, how he came within that of the cure for Glanders, from a Suffolk man who suddenly went west. I think most families, I suppose most small groups of people, certainly most families have devised it, I'm sure not educatedly, but devised their own private vocabularies and normally, I suppose, for fairly personal little doings around the house, and but words that are peculiar have a particular resonance in a family or a small group. There's a poem about one of those words, and I suppose if it's about anything, it's about a delight in or love of words. Quoof. How often have I carried our family word for the hot water bottle to a strange bed, as my father would juggle a red-hot half-brick in an old sock to his childhood settle. I have taken it into so many lovely hands, or laid it between us like a sword. An hotel room in New York City with a girl who spoke hardly any English, my hand on her breast like the smouldering one-off spoor of the Yeti, or some other shy beast that is yet to enter the language. It's about your own version of the Yeti, Bigfoot. Bigfoot comes, if he comes at all, among sumac and birches, stops halfway across the clearing. Wood smoke, the cabin where you mourn your wife, where, darkening the tiny window, is the fur coat you promised her when she was 20 or 21, you forget. I'll read two more, which leave us about right. Three more. Sorry, it just occurs to me. I heard a word last night which I'd never heard before. The word flaky, which I kind of missed. I'm told it has sort of 60-ish connotations, but no, yes. I must have missed it. This is a poem about one of those marvelous 60s girls who have carried on. Poem about morality and responsibility and all those highfalutin ideas, kissing and telling. Or she would turn up the songs of Leonard Cohen on the rickety old gramophone, and you knew by the way she unbound her tresses and stepped from her William Morris dresses, you might just as well be anyone. Goat's milk cheeses, Navajo rugs, her reading aloud from a dictionary of drugs. She made wine of almost everything. How many of those she found out on the street and fetched back to her attic room, to promise nothing, to take nothing for granted? How many would hold by the axiom she would intone as though it were her mantra? I could name names. I could be indiscreet. It's a poem about a man leaving a house that he's lived in for a while and gathering up his bits and pieces and disappearing. There's a reference in it to Pascal, who, if you remember, was convinced that just about there, on his left side, there was a great abyss and void into which he was always in danger of dropping. And when he went to bed at night, I'm told that he left a chair on the left-hand side of his bed so that he wouldn't keel over into it. I was thinking about that the other day, and I don't know, perhaps Pascal wasn't as smart as he's cracked up to be, because he could have put his bed in against the wall. Making the move. When Ulysses braved the wine-dark sea, he left his bow with Penelope, who would bend for no one but himself. I edge along the bookshelf, past bad Lord Byron, Raymond Chandler, Howard Hughes' The Hidden Years, past Blaise Pascal, who, bound in hide, divined the void to his left side. Such books as one may think one owns unloose themselves like stones and clatter down into this wider gulf between myself and my good wife. A Primus stove, a sleeping bag, the bow I bought through a catalogue when I was 13 or 14. It's, I beg your pardon, that would bend and break for anyone. Its boyish length of maple upon maple, unseasoned and unsupple. Were I embarking on that wine-dark sea, I would bring my bow along with me. And I'll end with a poem about a man who disappears very suddenly off the face of the earth. There's a word in it, rig, which is a kind of local word for a ridge or a furrow, a rig. Why Brownlee left and where he went is a mystery even now. For if a man should have been content, it was him. 2 acres of barley, 1 of potatoes, 4 bullocks, a milker, a slated farmhouse. He was last seen going out to plough on a March morning, bright and early. By noon, Brownlee was famous. They had found all abandoned, with the last rig unbroken, his pair of black horses like man and wife, shifting their weight from foot to foot and gazing into the future. Thank you very much indeed.